Have you ever had to deal with a boss who was a micromanager? If so, stay tuned to learn a tarot spread to help you figure out what's going on and how to fix the situation. Hi everybody, I'm Sue Ellen Clayton. Welcome to my channel where we're learning how to read tarot one card at a time. In today's reading, we'll be using a 3-card spread to answer the question, what will happen at work between me and my manager? I will be using the Radiant Rider-Waite Tarot, and there is a link below. This question was posted anonymously online by someone who I will call Sammi. Sammi wants to know the outcome at work between her and her manager. Her question is, what will happen at work between me and my manager? She is always interfering and micromanaging. Sammi does not mention using a spread, however, I will be using a 3-card current dynamic spread to help figure out the outcome of their relationship. Card number 1 looks at how Sammi sees her manager. Sammi drew the Knight of Pentacles. Card number 2 looks at how Sammi's manager sees her. Sammi drew the Hierophant. Card number 3 looks at the outcome of their current relationship, and Sammi drew the Ace of Swords. Let's begin by looking at my first impressions. We have 2 minor arcana cards. Pentacles is about work and Swords is about thoughts and communication. Both of these seem highly appropriate given Sammi's question. Both of these cards are facing toward our right, which is the future, so I feel like there is hope for their situation. In the middle we see the Hierophant, which is all about following rules. So I definitely think this is the area of conflict. Now let's look at each card individually and we'll see if I'm correct. Card number 1 looks at how Sammi sees her manager. Sammi drew the Knight of Pentacles. I think Sammi sees her manager as somebody who has worked hard to move up the ranks. She's probably gotten any required education through night school or correspondence courses rather than attending college right after high school. However, Sammi feels that her manager sometimes lacks good judgment, particularly because she doesn't give Sammi's ideas enough credit. First, let's talk a bit more about Knights because it explains how Sammi sees her manager. This information is from worldhistory.org and I've linked to it below. The process of becoming a knight began with being a page who was the youngest member of the royal court. Pages started training around the age of 7 by serving a local knight or members of the royal family. Their jobs included running messages, serving, cleaning clothing and weapons, and learning the basics of combat. The next step was to become a squire, which is a knight in training, and this started about the age of 14. Their jobs included learning weaponry and horsemanship, as well as taking care of a full knight. Squires would clean a knight's weapon, polish his armor, look after his horses, and help him dress for battle. They also learned skills such as hunting and falconry, and they also learned about music, dance, how to speak Latin and French, and how to have good manners. Another job of the squire was to look after the pages. As the squire got older, he learned about combat and would undergo extensive training to increase his strength and skills. Knighthood generally occurred between the ages of 18 and 21 in an elaborate ceremony. I think of knights as being the fraternity brothers of the court. They were well educated and well off, but their testosterone levels would overpower their brains sometimes. So I think this parallels how Sammi views her manager. She's somebody who started with the company when she was very young. She's probably done every single job at some point and done it all very well. Along the way, she's earned more education and more responsibility, including supervising the junior staff members. The Knight of Pentacles is the slowest moving of the knights. They are loyal, dependable, and hardworking, as you can see by the plowed fields in the background. They approach tasks slowly and methodically. They are okay with routines, even though others find them to be boring, as they know that they are important. So I think this is another clue about how Sammi feels about her manager. She's definitely a workhorse, but she's also very slow and methodical in her approach. Sammi finds this incredibly frustrating as she can often see faster, more efficient ways to get things done. Sammi's manager is someone who is always prepared. Behind the saddle is a black book, and under the saddle we see an orange blanket. As Liz Dean points out in her book, The Ultimate Guide to Tarot, the knight is fully prepared for his journey. He's brought something to read and perhaps a notebook to record his progress, so I think he's always working. The blanket shows that he's equipped his horse for the discomfort of a long day's ride, which indicates that underneath the micromanaging, Sammi's manager really cares about her employees. But being this detail-oriented can make the manager incredibly slow, and Sammi questions whether all the work is necessary. For instance, does she really need to pack a book for the trip? Doesn't that just take extra time and make more for the horse to carry? The knight's clothing shows someone who is very practical, as you can see by his simple tunic. I don't think that Sammi's manager shows up for work in designer clothing and high heels. She's somebody who gets her hands dirty and would prefer to wear jeans if that was appropriate. The red belt, along with the horse's red bridle and harness, shows passion. However, Pam Richards points out that this knight is not battling for love, ideas, or intellect. His battle is for a secure future. This is not someone who is going to fly off the handle and quit. Sammi's manager values security and plans to stay with the company for as long as she can, hopefully for the rest of her life. She's not fond of change and also makes decisions with security in mind. For example, why invest in a computerized inventory system when they've always counted their stock by hand and it's worked out just fine? The manager would prefer to save the money and have it there to use in tougher economic times. Sammi sees her manager as being very qualified because she's moved up through the ranks. She knows that she is very practical, dependable, detail-oriented, and hardworking. In addition, the manager is very loyal to both her employer and the people she's supervising and has no plans to quit. On the downside, Sammi sees her manager as being incredibly slow-moving, way too focused on boring details that don't matter, and adverse to considering new ideas or taking risks. Card number 2 looks at how Sammi's manager sees her. Sammi drew the Hierophant. The Hierophant is based on the Pope, which is the ultimate authority in the Catholic Church. It is a card about following rules, traditions, and social structures, not following your intuition or doing your own thing. In the case of Sammi's workplace, Sammi's manager sees her as being someone who is inflexible, feels that she knows best, and someone who wants to be in charge. I find this fascinating because Sammi and her manager are doing the same thing. And I think that is why they are colliding, because they are both very similar in that they are rule followers. However, Sammi is the employee, not the manager. The Hierophant is also a major arcana card, so it trumps the Knight of Pentacles in terms of power. It also represents the Pope, which is a lot more powerful than a mere knight. So I think a big problem is that Sammi is acting like a pope instead of acting like an employee, and the manager resents that. In this card, we can see Sammi with 2 other people. She's obviously in charge, and the disciples are listening to what she says. I think this is another issue. Sammi is undermining her manager's authority. Sammi feels like she knows what needs to be done and has no problem telling people what to do. And her fellow workers actually listen to her despite the fact she is not their boss. Popes have a lot of education and leadership experience. I looked at the qualifications of Pope Francis, who is the current Pope of the Catholic Church, and it's very impressive. My guess is that Sammi came to her job with some kind of advanced education, such as a business degree, as opposed to her manager who moved up through the ranks. So Sammi feels like she has a better grasp on how the business should be run, and she isn't shy about sharing her opinions. I'd actually been in this situation when I started my career as an accountant who was hired for a position that somebody else, who didn't have any formal education but had been with the company a long time, felt like they deserved. I remember discovering many things that had always been done a certain way, but due to my education, I knew were incorrect. It does create a lot of conflict when you point that out. So I think Sammi's boss sees her as a know-it-all who thinks that she knows better than the manager. The manager sees Sammi doing things that are beyond her authority, which includes undermining the manager's decisions. You've made it this far in the video, and I wanted to stop and ask for a favor if you're not already a subscriber, and that is to please hit the subscribe button. It's free for you, and it will also help me to grow this channel. Plus, it means that you won't miss anything. Thanks so much, and if you're already a subscriber, I truly appreciate your ongoing support. Now let's get back to the video. Card number 3 looks at the outcome of their current relationship. Sammi drew the Ace of Swords. The Ace of Swords also represents communication, logical thoughts, and new beginnings. It's time for Sammi and her manager to start over and work together. The sword has two sides. I think that both Sammi and her manager have played a role in their problems, and they both must take responsibility for fixing things. They both want the best for the company. It's time to use this sword to cut away any thoughts, beliefs, or actions that are keeping them from working harmoniously. The point of the sword is standing straight up. It's interesting that there are only 2 other swords in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck that point straight up, the Queen of Swords and Justice. This position signifies the commitment to the truth, rather than what they might want to believe to be true. For instance, the manager is the boss, despite the fact that Sammi thinks she knows better. They need to figure out boundaries so that Sammi is not overstepping her authority. On the opposite side, it is also true that Sammi has more education than the manager. She brings good ideas to the table. The manager needs to respect that and be willing to consider some changes. On top of the sword, we see a gold crown. Crowns are about authority and power, as well as conscious ideas that we are ready to put into action. The living plants on the crown symbolize the fertility of the mind. These women are on the same page, and they both have the same goals. They need to figure out a way to communicate. In addition, Sammi needs to make an effort to give her manager the respect that she deserves. If they can figure out a way to communicate, and the manager knows that Sammi is being open and honest, I think that she will stop micromanaging. Both women want the best for the company, and I feel like they can have a good relationship in the future. Let's summarize. Sammi wanted to know the outcome of her relationship with her manager, who Sammi says is always interfering. Card number 1, the Knight of Pentacles, looks at how Sammi sees her manager. Sammi sees her manager as somebody who has worked hard to move up the ranks, but someone who sometimes lacks good judgment because she doesn't consider Sammi's ideas. The manager is loyal to the company and works hard, but she's also very slow and methodical in her approach and adverse to taking risks. Sammi finds this incredibly frustrating. Card number 2, the Hierophant, looks at how Sammi's manager sees her. The manager sees Sammi as someone who is inflexible and a know-it-all who flaunts her education. She feels like Sammi oversteps her authority by telling her fellow workers what to do. For this reason, the manager does not trust Sammi because she never knows what is happening. Her goal isn't to micromanage, it's to be certain what is going on. Card number 3, the Ace of Swords, looks at the outcome of their current relationship. I think that if they start communicating, and if Sammi stops trying to undermine her manager's authority, the micromanaging will stop and they can develop a good working relationship. I hope that this video gave you some ideas that you can apply to your tarot practice. Please leave a comment if you'd like to share what you learned. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.